College football is built on tradition, passionate fan bases, and rivalries, but as the bigger conferences abandon these core principles like it's a contest, most of these smaller group of 5 conferences are taking the opposite approach. Look no further than the MAC and the Sun Belt, who are doing everything they can to keep these core principles alive. So today, we're going to shine some light on some of the best group of 5 rivalries, along with a couple classic moments from each rivalry. Side note, Army-Navy will not be on here, as I covered it recently in my 10 best college football rivalries video, but just know, Army-Navy is the true and undisputed number 1, so with that out of the way, let's get started. Starting us off at number 10 is a truly underrated gem in New Mexico versus New Mexico State, also known as the Rio Grande or Rio Grande rivalry. Now the Lobos currently hold a commanding lead in the overall series with 74 wins to the Aggies 35, but it has been much more competitive in recent times, with both teams being fairly even over their past 15 matchups. This rivalry dates all the way back to 1894, almost 2 decades before New Mexico was even granted statehood. With that has come some serious animosity for each other, with a lot of it stemming from the Lobos getting more money and just treated more favorably in general than the Aggies. Thus, New Mexico fans love to look down on their little brother from Las Cruces, which, as you would expect, has led to some very heated and chaotic moments off the field between these two fan bases. On the field, meanwhile, this rivalry has produced some absolutely incredible moments, like in their 2014 matchup, for example, where both teams engaged in an epic shootout fitting of its old Wild West backdrop. Both teams went back and forth, pulling out all the tricks they had in their bag, until the Lobos finally put the dagger in their hated in-state rival with just 27 seconds left on the clock, securing the Lobos their 3rd straight victory in the series. A few years later in 2017, these two provided yet another wild finish in a game that was dominated by New Mexico State, who at one point had run out to a 30-5 lead. Facing a 25-point deficit entering the final quarter, the Lobos would rally, scoring 23 unanswered points, putting them just 2 points away from an incredible 25-point comeback. But it wasn't meant to be, as the Aggies would get the stop and hold on for a 30-28 victory. Now the Rio Grande rivalry is often very overlooked for many reasons, but make no mistake about it, this is one of the most heated rivalries in all of college football. Next up at number 9, we head back to the desert for the University of Nevada in Reno versus the University of Nevada in Las Vegas in the Battle for Nevada. The Wolfpack lead the overall series with 29 wins to UNLV's 21. Now you can't talk about this rivalry without talking about the trophy that is given to the winning team, which in this case is a 550-pound cannon that cost over $10,000 to build back in the 60s when it was created. That's over $70,000 in today's money, making it not just the heaviest, but also the most expensive trophy in college football. The Fremont Cannon dates all the way back to 1970 and has seen some absolutely incredible moments over the years, like in 1978 for example, when legendary Wolfpack head coach Chris Ault convinced the staff at Harry Reid International Airport to allow the team to disassemble and take the cannon on the plane ride home with them. Or in the year 2000, when UNLV fans and players tried to lift it as if it were just any other trophy. They dropped it and ended up costing the university over $1,500 to repair the damages. Now this trophy is quite fitting for a rivalry that involves two fan bases that absolutely detest each other's very existence, which, as you would expect, has led to some absolutely wild moments off the field. On the field, meanwhile, there has been no shortage of classic moments, like in 2012 when the 5-1 Wolfpack entered as a massive favorite over a fledgling 1-5 UNLV squad. Despite that, the Rebels came out with a vengeance, looking to end the Wolfpack's 7-game win streak in the series, running out to an early 21-0 lead. But the Pack were far from dead and slowly started to chip away at the Rebels' lead. But after halftime, the Pack flipped the switch. With backup quarterback Devin Combs leading the way, the Wolfpack offense would score 28 points, stealing a 42-37 victory, giving Nevada their 8th straight win in the series. The Rebels would finally end that streak a year later in an absolute thriller, but it was their win a few years later in 2019 that gave some eerie callbacks to that 2012 matchup. Again, the Rebels would start hot, leaping out to a 17-0 lead early, and yet again, much like 2012, the Wolfpack refused to go away, slowly crawling out of that 17-point hole and finally tying the game with less than 2 minutes to play. The boys from Reno would only be able to muster a field goal to start the overtime period, and that slight crack of the door to victory was all UNLV quarterback Kenyon Oblad would need.
Oblad hangs in, touchdown, no flags, ball game over. UNLV has won it.
This rivalry represents so much about what we all love about college football. It has great traditions, passionate fan bases, and a little bit of local conflict that makes rivalries and bragging rights mean that much more. Next up at number 8, we have Fresno State versus Hawaii in the battle for the mythical golden screwdriver. The Bulldogs currently hold a 30-25 advantage over the Warriors in the overall series. Now unfortunately, this rivalry does look to be coming to an end, with Fresno State bolting for the bastardized version of the Pac-12 that's currently being put together. Now the legend of the mythical golden screwdriver is a point of contention between the two fan bases, but the basics of the story are as follows. After the 2002 meeting that resulted in a 31-21 Hawaii victory, a screwdriver, amongst many other things, was thrown from the Fresno State student section at a Hawaii player. Now it's never been verified that this actually happened, as Fresno State investigated the incident, but no punishments were ever handed down. However, their athletic department did issue an apology, saying that they were certain that some objects were thrown from the student section. However, some Bulldogs fans still claim to this day that the entire thing was a hoax. But the bitterness in this rivalry goes far beyond just one incident, as both fan bases have been known to engage in both verbal and physical abuses from time to time. On the football field though, these two have delivered some absolute classics over the years. Like in their 2008 meeting, for example, Fresno State would enter that game ranked 22nd in the country and look to be among the very best of the Group of 5 conferences. Hawaii, meanwhile, was 1-3 and one of the worst teams in all of college football. But on this day, nobody told them that, as the Warriors would jump out to a 26-9 lead early in the third quarter. Desperate to keep a second loss off their record, Fresno State would spark an insane comeback that would see them eventually force overtime. The Bulldogs would get the ball first, and after a quick 3-and-out, they would send out kicker Ken Gosling to give them the lead. If you're a Fresno State fan, now would be a good time to look away.
Ready for the snap. There it is. It's placed. It's kicked. It is. Not good. It is not good.
Running into the kicker. Oh. Defense, number 23. 5-yard penalty. Replay, fourth down.
This one.
Did it again. That's how
It is down. It is kicked. It is good. Hawaii wins it. Hawaii upsets Fresno State.
A few years later in 2013, we nearly got one of the most magical comebacks of all time. Fresno State was led by the superstar duo of Derek Carr and Devontae Adams, and again, they looked to be among the very best of the G5, while Hawaii was 0-3 and in the midst of a very dark period under head coach Norm Chow. So when Fresno State jumped out to a 42-3 lead midway through the third quarter, nobody was surprised, and everybody had turned the channel. But what happened next was one of the most shocking comebacks in all of sports. The Warriors would come all the way back to cut the lead to just 5 points, and with under 2 minutes left in the game, Hawaii would get the ball back with one final chance to put the finishing touches on the most epic of comebacks. But on this day, it wasn't meant to be, as the Bulldogs would hold on and go on to have one of their best seasons in school history, while Hawaii finished just 1-11 as one of the worst teams in college football. Unfortunately, this rivalry looks to be yet another casualty of the conference realignment era, but its legacy will forever live on as one of the fiercest Group of 5 rivalries in college football. and it's always just one spark away from reigniting yet again. Next up at number 7, we have the border war / the battle for the Golden Boot between Colorado State and Wyoming. Currently, the Rams hold a 9-win advantage in the overall series with 60 wins to Wyoming's 51. Now, this fascinating rivalry dates all the way back to 1899, when the very first meeting ended in controversial fashion with allegations of cheating and the officials failing to keep control of the field. This would lead to a Colorado State forfeit and a brawl taking place on the field. Since then, bad blood has remained and been a constant throughout the history of this rivalry. But beyond the bad blood and local conflict, this game has some great traditions around it as well, one of which is the boot run, where the game ball is relayed from the visiting team stadium to the stadium where the game is set to take place. The two schools' ROTC detachments run the ball from one stadium to the state line, where a ceremonial handoff takes place as the other side takes the ball and runs it to the other stadium. And how could we not talk about the bronze boot, one of the most unique trophies in all of college football? It was partially made with a real boot that was donated to Colorado State by Army Captain Dan Romero, who was an ROTC instructor at the school prior to the war in Vietnam, which he served in. Beyond its unique traditions, this rivalry has also produced some incredible moments on the gridiron, like in 1966 in the infamous bounce pass. Trailing in the third quarter, Rams head coach Milo Lude drew up one of the best trick plays in football history. Colorado State would go on to upset the Cowboys 12-10 on that day. It was Wyoming's only loss of that season and one of only 2 wins that the Rams would get over the Cowboys between 1953 and 1973. Another classic moment from this rivalry came in 1996. Again, the Cowboys were in the midst of one of their best seasons in school history, but found themselves trailing late in the fourth quarter against a very motivated Colorado State squad that was looking to end their rivals' hopes of a WAC title. But instead, Wyoming would produce one of the greatest moments in program history, a 96-yard drive that ended with a 6-yard touchdown run, capping off one of the greatest moments in Wyoming football history. It is forever remembered in Cowboys lore as the drive. The Colorado State and Wyoming rivalry is incredibly unique and carries a ton of history and tradition along with it, making it one of the best rivalries in the group of 5. Up next at number 6, we have Toledo versus Bowling Green in the Battle of I-75, or as it may be better known locally, the Black Swamp Showdown. The Rockets currently hold the slimmest of leads in the overall series with 43 wins to the Falcons' 42. This rivalry is easily one of the best in the MAC, which is high praise as MACtion always provides some of the wildest rivalry games every single year. Separated by just 25 miles, this rivalry gets to the grassroots of college football, pitting local neighbors against each other for one day of the year that determines bragging rights for the next 365. But just ask anybody who lives in the area or went to either school, this feud runs incredibly deep. The real igniting point though came back in 1948. Toledo had won the game 63-0, and as you would expect, that led to a bit of tension between the players and fans, and it would end up leading to a massive brawl that would break out with fans and players alike involved. This would lead to the rivalry being suspended for 13 years. Since then, bad blood has been a constant between these two schools. There's also been no shortage of classic games either, especially over the past few years. Their 2022 matchup on a cold, snowy Tuesday night was one of the craziest finishes that you will ever see. The Falcons blew an early 21-0 lead as the Rockets slowly chipped away. But faced with a 4th and 7 and 1 minute left on the clock, the Rockets were in desperate need of someone to make a play.
There's Newton, second receiver from the top.
A 4th down and 7 to keep the game going. Going up top, that's complete. The game continues, and a first down. Maddox is in for a touchdown.
But not to be outdone, the Falcons were here to spoil the party, and with just 21 seconds left, they did just that.
From the 42 on 3rd and 10. And Hines nearly got home again. McDonald runs away, has it complete, and there goes Keith into field goal range with the first down, off a tackle, end zone! This is MACtion!
The following year in 2013, the ante was upped a little bit more. This time, the Rockets were 9-1 and looking to secure a spot in the MAC title game. The Rockets, meanwhile, were looking to end their rivals' 9-game win streak and play spoiler. Much like the year prior, Bowling Green ran out and took an early lead, with it eventually standing at 28-10 heading into the half. And just like the year prior, the Rockets were far from folding. Trailing by 6 with just under 2 minutes left in the game, the Rockets would add another legendary moment to this rivalry's storied history.
This is your ball game. Finn floats it, keeps Toledo alive. Jacquez Stewart turns on the gas. Touchdown, Toledo!
The Black Swamp Showdown is a classic rivalry separated by just a few miles and involving two smaller schools. Now, it does have a tendency to get overlooked, but to the hardcore college football fans that know, it is one of the funnest rivalries to follow throughout college football. No matter what, there's always some kind of wackiness at play whenever these two programs come together. Coming in at number 5, we have South Alabama versus the Men of Troy in the battle for the belt. The Trojans currently lead the overall series with 9 wins to the Jaguars' 4. Now, this is a newer rivalry as South Alabama has only recently joined the college football space, but in its short time, it has built a bit of a reputation as one of the best rivalries in the Sun Belt, which says a lot because the Sun Belt has some of the most intense rivalries across all of college football. And speaking of belts, the trophy that the two programs compete over is an old school pro wrestling belt that was created back in 2015 by the student government associations from both schools. And ever since its creation, both teams and fan bases have latched onto the belt, making it a central focus of the rivalry. Now, as everyone knows, down in the South, college football is like religion, and this rivalry is a great representation of that. Both schools have very dedicated and passionate fan bases that routinely show up regardless of their team's record. There's also a very interesting urban versus rural divide with these two as well, with South Alabama being located in Mobile, which is one of the biggest cities in the state of Alabama with a population of over 200,000, while Troy meanwhile is located in Troy, Alabama, which has a much smaller population of just under 18,000. Now, though these two have only met 13 times so far on the gridiron, they've found a way to produce some incredible moments that have helped this rivalry gain a reputation as one of the best amongst the group of 5. Starting with their second ever meeting back in 2013, much like the year prior in Mobile, the Men of Troy came out clicking and ran out to a 24-7 lead, threatening to blow the boys from the South out of the stadium. But the Jags were far from dead, climbing all the way back to eventually take the lead with just under a minute left. Trailing by 6 and with momentum no longer at their backs, the Trojans desperately needed something special. And with just 14 seconds left on the clock, they would find it.
Kerry Franklin is the running back who's in. He's there to stop that blitz. Lob pass goes into the end zone, and it is caught! Touchdown!
A couple of years later in 2013, the Jaguars would walk into enemy territory in front of a blackout crowd of over 22,000 people. But the Jaguars were not intimidated by the environment, and their win the year prior in Mobile had given them a newfound sense of confidence that helped them run out to a 21-8 lead. The Men of Troy would come back and cut the lead to 6, but unlike 2013, this time the Jags were ready and they suffocated the Trojan offense the rest of the way, earning a 24-18 victory, sending the blackout crowd home with sad faces. It was the Jags' second straight win in the series, something they have yet to accomplish since. Now, the battle for the belt is still a very young rivalry that is yet to reach its full potential, and yet it has still found a way to become one of the best rivalries in the Sun Belt, a conference that is absolutely loaded with fun rivalries all the way around. Next up at number 4, we head back to the MAC for Ball State versus Northern Illinois in the battle for the Bronze Stalk. Now, this rivalry is currently all knotted up at 25 wins apiece and is on an absolutely incredible streak of close games. In fact, its last 7 installments have all ended as one-score games that came down to the final minutes. Now these two rivals do not have a long and storied history of wild brawls or crazy off the field incidents, but what it lacks in those departments, it easily makes up for with its incredible ability to produce instant classics at an absolutely absurd pace. The two programs first met back in 1941 in a game that would truly set the tone for the rivalry, ending in a 6-6 tie. Ever since then, both programs have seen an era of dominance when it comes to the rivalry, with the Cardinals dominating from 1974 through 1998, going 16-1 over that stretch, while the Huskies meanwhile dominated the rivalry from 1999 through 2018, going 17-3 during that period of domination. Obviously, to most casual observers, this rivalry is well known for its strange and unique trophy, which is some bronze corn stalks that are meant to represent the agricultural bond between the two states. Now, it's no doubt one of the most unique trophies in all of college football, and while it ain't flashy, it perfectly nails the regional aesthetic and gives the rivalry a true sense of identity. But to the hardcore college football and action fans, this rivalry is more known for its epic showdowns on the gridiron more than anything else. This has been especially true in recent years, where this rivalry has produced some incredible finishes, like in 2021 for instance. Despite the Huskies digging themselves a 17-7 hole early in the game thanks to some bad turnovers, they were the better team for a majority of the contest, moving the ball up and down the field with ease while playing relatively decent defense. But still, Ball State would fight back to retake the lead with a 48-yard field goal that looked to possibly be the dagger with under 2 minutes left in the game. However, Huskies quarterback Rocky Lombardi threw on the cape and lived up to his legendary name, driving the Huskies into field goal territory where they would finally end the proceeding with a 32-yard field goal to give the Huskies the win. And how could we not talk about their matchup from this past season in 2024? A game that was pure insanity from start to finish that inevitably came down to the final 30 seconds. NIU scored twice in the final 5 minutes, including the go-ahead field goal with just 15 seconds left on the clock. But then, just as all hope seemed to be lost, this happened.
Caden Zamanza looking to lead this offense to a win. He'll take a shot at it downfield and it's caught. Quick release, finds Koziel. Game on the line. It's up, it's long enough, and it's good!
The battle for the bronze stalk might be one of the most underrated rivalries in all of college football, but its ability to produce gridiron classics and shocking finishes at an incredible pace makes it one of the best rivalries in the MAC and one of the best rivalries in the group of 5 as a whole. Next up at number 3, we have Appalachian State versus Georgia Southern, and whenever these two get together, you already know it's deeper than hate. The Mountaineers currently hold a 22-17 advantage over the Eagles from southeastern Georgia. Now this rivalry is new to the FBS, as it spent most of its history as one of the best rivalries in the FCS. But ever since its inception, this rivalry has been all about high tensions and classic moments. Now it needs to be said off the top that the Sun Belt has some of the craziest and most passionate fans in all of college football, and this rivalry represents that to a T. A classic example of this came after their 2003 matchup, a game that saw Georgia Southern enter as a decent favorite, as they seemed to have the Mountaineers' number, having won 4 straight matchups heading in. But on this day, the Apps had had enough, completing a late comeback that would see the fans completely lose their minds. This culminated in the goalpost being torn down and the fans attacking the Georgia Southern bus with said goalpost. It's incidents like that that have shaped this rivalry and made it one of the more intense rivalries in the sport. There have also been so many classic games in this rivalry's storied history that it deserves its own video in the future. But here today, we're just going to look at their 2010 and 2011 matchups. Starting in 2010, App State walked into Statesboro that year, ranked number 1 in the FCS, and had not lost a conference game since 2007 against none other than Georgia Southern, who were now rebuilding under new head coach Jeff Monken, who desperately needed a signature win. The Eagles would leave it all on the field that day, forcing an overtime that'll live on forever in Georgia Southern football lore.
Two receivers left, one to the right. Now they'll motion Robinson from left to right. Shaw, option. Shaw will keep. Shaw's to the 15. Shaw breaks a shoestring tackle. He's to the 5. Brought down at the 4-yard line. First down and 10, Georgia Southern. Robinson in motion. Now Shaw will rise back up. Get him reset. Snap. Robert Brown powering his way down. Put an Eagle 6 on it. Touchdown, Georgia Southern. Crowd gets on their feet here at Allen E. Paulson Stadium. Third down and 10 at the 11-yard line. Presley out of the shotgun. Presley in the pocket now. Decides to tuck and run. Presley in trouble and dropped at the 9. Ball loose. Georgia Southern's got it. Number 1 goes down. Number 1 goes down. Number 1 goes down.
The following year in 2011, the rules were reversed. This time, the Eagles were heading up to Boone, North Carolina, and they were bringing the number 1 ranking in the country with them. The Mountaineers would go on to take a 17-3 lead into the half that day, but the number 1 team in the nation wasn't going to go down without a fight, coming all the way back to tie the game at 17. This would lead to one of the most controversial plays in the series history. This play is still a massive point of contention between the two fan bases, as Georgia Southern fans insist to this day that it was an incomplete pass, but it's nearly impossible to tell from this angle who's right, making it one of the most controversial moments in this series history. Now, in a time where great rivalries seem to get thrown away with little to no regard, it's nice to see the Sun Belt take the opposite approach. And given this great rivalry's storied history, it's not far-fetched that this could become the best rivalry amongst the smaller conferences in the next 10 years. Next up at number 2, we have Central Michigan versus Western Michigan in the battle for the victory cannon in the Michigan MAC trophies. Western currently holds the lead in this very heated rivalry with 53 wins to Central's 40. Now, for Central and Western fans, this is not just a rivalry, it's a way of life. Throughout most of its history, these two rivals have produced nothing but action-packed hate. Whether it be on or off the gridiron, whenever Central and Western get together, it's time to grab a cold one and watch the pure madness unfold. Now, due to this rivalry's very fierce nature, it has seen some darker days in terms of violence, with most of that violence taking place back in the late 80s and early 90s, where a series of riots caused thousands of dollars in damage and over 100 arrests in Mount Pleasant following Central wins over Western. Thankfully, that's all in the past, but the animosity between the two schools and fan bases continues to grow. In my opinion, this is the best rivalry in the MAC. It has great traditions, very loyal fan bases, and an absolutely absurd amount of close games throughout its very storied history. One of such games came back in 2007, a game that entered the fourth quarter as a 10-7 defensive struggle, but suddenly turned into an offensive explosion that's nearly impossible to put into words.
Lefevre, a design rollout, cuts it back, tries to reverse, and gets in. He looked like he was at the 6-inch line to me. Hiller instead of the outside, and the hitch to the outside, getting loose, Antonio Brown into the end zone. Touchdown, Chippewa. And they far you have to go. Hiller has his team set quickly, looks for the slant, bobbled, and caught. Touchdown, Herb Martin scores.
Central looked to be one step ahead nearly the entire day. That was until Western would score 2 touchdowns in the final 3 minutes to finally retake the lead. But again, Central was one step ahead, going 65 yards in 8 plays to finally put the dagger in their hated rivals. And who could ever forget their snowy showdown from 2022? It was a defensive struggle since most of the first half took place in blizzard-like conditions. Things finally cleared up later in the game, which finally helped spark the Western offense as the Broncos would come back to steal a legendary game in the series. This is easily one of the best rivalries amongst all the group of 5. Whether it's on or off the football field, these two schools and fan bases continue to add fuel to the fire of this very storied rivalry, making the chances of it ever cooling down non-existent. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Middle Tennessee State versus Western Kentucky, two small schools separated by 100 miles of hate. The Hilltoppers currently hold a very slight 38-35 advantage in the overall series. Now, this spectacular rivalry is a perfect representation of the Group of Five and college football as a whole. It truly gets to the heart of the sport. It has great traditions like Hate Week, for example, which both schools participate in during the week leading up to the game. It also has very loyal and dedicated fan bases that have helped shape and make this rivalry become as special as it is. And most importantly, it has been incredibly competitive over the course of its history. Both teams have seen eras of dominance over the course of the rivalry, but they always end up just about even every single time. But more than anything else, the reason why this is the best rivalry amongst the Group of Five is because of their incredible number of classic games and memorable moments. One of such came back in 2014. From the very first snap of this game, it was all gas and no brakes. Both teams would take and blow double-digit leads in just the first half alone. The Hilltoppers, despite being on the back foot for the entire second half, would need a last-minute field goal to send the game into overtime. The Blue Raiders would start the overtime off with a 25-yard touchdown strike on the very first play, only for the Hilltoppers to punch one in moments later to send the game on to a second overtime, where both offenses would struggle, leading to matching field goals in a third overtime. The Blue Raiders would hold the Hilltoppers to a field goal to start OT number 3. With that, the door to victory had swung wide open.
Parker, the running back. Back to throw Grammer. Throws toward the corner of the end zone. Caught at the 5. Down to the 2-yard line. Into the end zone. Middle wins. What an effort. What an effort. Ed Marcus Batiste wins it for Middle Tennessee.
A few years later in 2017, these two would produce yet another incredible 3-overtime thriller. This time, the game as a whole was much quieter, at least for the first 3 quarters. But then, just as the final 15 minutes was put up on the board, all hell would break loose. Both squads would combine to score 35 points in the final frame. But it wasn't enough, as again these two bitter rivals would need overtime to settle their differences. The Hilltoppers had learned a very hard lesson from their 3-overtime loss years ago, and this time they made sure everyone knew that this time things were going to be different.
Here on 2nd and goal, White on the rollout, Fant the catch and the touchdown! White, the other side, Eccles Looper makes the grab for the touchdown! To give Middle Tennessee the advantage here in the 3rd overtime. Hold is there, kick is up, and it's no good! Can Nuss hit and send Western Kentucky to a bowl game? From 37, it's good! The Middle Tennessee State and Western Kentucky rivalry is, in my opinion, the best rivalry in the Group of Five. It is as good a representation of the heart of college football as you are going to get. It doesn't need national title implications or college game day to make it special, because to the people of Murfreesboro, Tennessee and Bowling Green, Kentucky, this is peak college football.